my mom, my brother, my sister, and I went to my grandma's house for Christmas to celebrate with a bunch of our other families. So from there, my mom ended up going back to vote, and we were left at my grandma's house, my brother, my sister, and all my cousins, and some of the aunts that lived there. I remember we were in a church, not the same church I was burned in, but in a different church. And I saw a bunch of guys with like Nissans, like celebrating after the elections. And we heard that there were people getting killed and houses being burned. So in the middle of the night, around like 10 p.m. or 9 p.m., we woke up and left and went to hide in holes because we didn't want to get killed while we were sleeping. We slept in the hole throughout until like 3 a.m. and then went back to where we were staying. And I went back to my cousin's room, like there's they call them keja, and we slept there, just him and I. And I remember my uncle came and he locked our room. As days went by, things were not very good. I remember it was around like the 31st of December in 2007. My cousin and I, tulikuwa tumeenda kuchunga mbuzi. While we were out there, my uncle called us in. We had to leave and leave the sheeps. So we left and we went to a church that was nearby because they knew that what was happening in the country wasn't good. And we went to the church to seek refuge. So it wasn't just us. My family went there, everybody that was at my grandma's house, and everybody else who was from the village. So it was packed, like people from around the area were out there. And I remember we went there and I was with my friends because we were just having fun and the older people were doing their thing during the night. So we stayed there like throughout most of the night. During around like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., we went back to my grandma's house because we needed to get clothes and because they found out we would be sleeping in the church. So we went and we wore like double clothes, like 2 shirts, 2 sweaters. I remember I had like 2 pants on. I had shorts and pants on. And then we went back to the church and spent the night there. I remember that night, a bunch of my friends slept in the church. Some slept outside. I was one of those that slept outside. We, as the kids, we went out to play games. We were out there playing games and making jokes. And then after that, we had to come in because lunch was approaching. The women were cooking. They were making food for everybody. They had like those big sufurias that they make food out of. And so once we came in, I heard people throwing rocks at the church while with my friends. So we went and checked it out, like what was happening. And in the church, they have these 2 doors that open, the 2 big doors that everybody comes in. And then there's a small door that the pastor usually came in from. And so we went to the big door where everybody would enter from. And they were throwing rocks, like there were rocks being thrown. So once I got outside and saw what was happening, I went back inside the church. And some of my friends did too, but most of them like left outside the church. I went inside the church, and as soon as I went inside the church, a bunch of people came inside the church too. Because I remember I saw like it was a bunch of people charging towards the church. I freaked out and got scared and went back in the church. And once I was inside and everybody else was inside, the people that came, they came and locked the 2 big doors. They pushed them in. And then remember when I said we went and took clothes the night before, and some people went and got mattresses where they would sleep in. And some people came with their bikes. Some people came with like clothes and blankets. I remember they took the bikes that people brought, and after they locked the doors, they put the bikes next to the door so that when you were inside, you wouldn't be able to push it out. And so that was no way of getting out. And the only option was either the windows or the small doors that the pastor came out of. They took the mattresses as well and put them around the church, and then they lit it on fire while we were inside. So they were trying to kill us while we were inside. And everybody was out there just trying to get out. Everybody was trying to do their own thing and find their way to get out. Some people were jumping out of the window, and it was packed, so it was hard for people. I remember I saw my aunt, and she had her kid with her, and we didn't even like talk because she was also trying to get out. I was also trying to get out, and people were stepping on me and others. Like it was like people were just trying to get out, and I was small. So I remember the way actually my hands were burned was because like things were falling on my head, and like the fire that was coming, and I was trying to protect myself, and that's how my hands ended up getting burned. It was a struggle to get out, but eventually I got out. I always said that it's God that helped me get out, because it was like once I was inside, and then the next thing I was outside. So for me, it was like it was something else. And I remember I wasn't feeling pain, so I didn't even know at this point that I'm burned. I don't know what's happening. I was confused. I was just trying to get back to my grandma's house because I thought everybody else was there. Like they had left, and when I got out, there were like a few people outside, and then there were dead bodies outside. And I remember I was walking. I got out of the church and I was walking, and I was trying to go back to my grandma's house. And right there, there's a corner before you could go up. There was a guy who asked me. He said it in Swahili. It was like, if you go back that way, we're gonna kill you, or you're gonna die. So you better just get to step in and walk where everybody else was walking. And that's when I saw everybody else that was leaving the church. They were walking where everybody else was walking to go and find refuge. So I followed the line, and as I was walking, I came across my aunt and my sister, and my sister looked at me and she was shocked. Like she was like, "Wow, I still remember that." And she asked my aunt, like, should we tell him what happened or how he looks? And then my aunt was like, no, don't tell him. So I wasn't even thinking about what they were talking about. And I continued walking. And one thing I remember is I was very thirsty. I was thirsty. All I wanted was water. And there were very good people that were outside with water jars and what we call mtungis, but they store water. And they would give us water. I remember I just wanted to just keep drinking water. And we walked for about a mile or two, if I'm not wrong. And then eventually we got to the main road. And at the main road, I remember I saw my shosho, my grandma, and she was there, and she saw me, and she kind of like fainted. She was shocked, and she was trying to run towards me, but the people she was with like pulled her back. And right when I got to the main road, there was a good Samaritan, a guy who came with this pickup truck and got us inside. And I remember that's when I met like other people that were burned in that same pickup truck. There were other people that were burned, and one of the girls that we actually came with to the U.S. was there in the same truck. So we went in, and they took us to the hospital. The next day, I woke up actually after the incident happened. I freaked out. Like I was scared. Like I looked at my hands and I was screaming, and I was like, I told my dad, I was like, my hand they look like frogs, literally. And I was crying. I cried because I remember I was like, no one is ever gonna want to be with me. I'm never gonna have a wife. And I remember that at 11, it was the saddest thing that happened to me. And I was like, there's no way this is it. My life is over, and I'm just gonna be that one kid that everybody just looks at, and it's like, well, I wonder what happened to him, you know? I ended up staying in the hospital for a while before my mom came. And then I remember she came, and I remember like I couldn't see her, but I could hear her voice. And she recognized me because I know after the story, she told me that she didn't recognize me, but she knew me with the shorts I was wearing, because I had taken off what I was wearing before that was burned, and I had my blue shorts that were left under me. And that's how my mom like realized me. And I remember I had like my eyes were closed, and I was speaking to her, but I couldn't see her, and I was scared. I stayed in that hospital for 3 months. After the 3 months, I wasn't getting better. So we ended up moving to a better hospital. In this hospital, it's unique because we had missionaries that would come from the U.S. and come to Kenya. So we were staying there. I was having surgeries like day in, day out. I was getting my head like cleaned out. I was burned 40% of my body, but most of it was just my head. And I was having surgeries all the time. I was having skin grafts. I got skin grafts. In the first hospital, it was weird because they weren't like very professional. I remember I had skin grafts, and the skin grafts had to have skin grafts on them because it was so bad. Like with skin grafts, you're supposed to take out like a piece of the skin and apply it somewhere else. Like most of my head, I have like skin grafts, but they would like curve in the skin, and then the wounds wouldn't heal. So then I remember in this hospital, I had to get a skin graft on my skin graft. That's how bad it was. Yeah, so I had that going on for a while. I was having surgeries all the time. I had skin grafts from my back. Like my back has like scars that are from the skin grafts that were put on my head and also on my legs. We stayed there for 8 months, for 7 months, because the total was 10 months. So it's 3 months in the first hospital and then 8 months in the second hospital. I still had wounds, but I had to be discharged and begin school. We got to go to a school that was a boarding school, and I ended up going to that school for 8 months. But since my wounds weren't like, they were healing, but I still had things that could be fixed. I remember that there were a group of people that got together and fundraised for us. So they asked Kenyan and fundraised throughout Kenya. They were trying to raise 30 million shillings for us to come abroad and get better treatment at Shriners Hospital. So they came together, and we ended up going to the White House, you would call it in Kenya, and we met the president, and we talked, and then they gave us like visas and to come to the U.S. But the initial group that started that whole thing were the people that came together to help us out. So those people really like made a big difference, because they organized how we're gonna go from here to the U.S. and how everything would be taken care of. So as soon as the government took over, they were able to help us out for the first few years. I've had about 26 surgeries in the U.S. And one of my highlights of my surgeries was the one where I was having surgery and I almost died. My heart stopped. I had the medicine in, and right when they were about to do the surgery, now this whole time I'm asleep, my heart stopped. And I could remember I woke up and I couldn't move because I was under anesthesia. So I could see what was happening, but I couldn't move. And then they like covered me with a thing where I couldn't, but it was like I could feel what they were doing, like the pumps, but I couldn't move, or I couldn't tell them like I'm alive. I was scared that, because they covered me with something, and I thought I was dead, but I knew I wasn't dead because I could see you guys, and they're really like trying to pump me. I ended up getting better after that, but I spent like 5 days in the ICU. I couldn't talk. I had tubes everywhere, and I wasn't able to talk. I wasn't able to do things. I had to learn how to walk again, because that incident like really took a lot from me. Whenever I would try to walk, my head would feel dizzy. I would feel dizzy. So whenever I needed things, I would have to write it down on like a paper, and then my mom would speak it out to me what I needed, and then I would write everything that I needed to get done. But eventually, my family came and joined me my mom and I 5 years later, just my brother and sister. But my dad wasn't. But he came here. I think it was like a year after my siblings came. So he's been here for about 2 years. My siblings have been here for about 3. The idea was for me to come to the U.S. for only 8 months and get treatment and go back to Kenya. But the treatment kept taking longer, so we would keep extending our visa eventually. And ever since that, I've been in the U.S. for 8 years now. Reason for us making this video is to try and really plead for peace in Kenya during these elections that are coming up on August 8th, because I believe that if we fight against each other, that Kenya is really going to be losing. Kenya has like the best internet speed in the world, and I believe if we do fight in this election, all those opportunities that we could take part of, we're not going to be able to. Growing up in America, I've realized how big, Kenya is really like, it's growing. It's a growing country, and I've seen, with America, being in America, I've seen what Americans do and how much opportunity there are in America, and I believe that Kenya is getting to that level. For me, my dad had a business. My dad had a business that he was running in Kenya, and it was really growing. And the saddest part is, during the elections, they burned his building down and they burned everything. So there was, even if the elections were going to come and pass, he wasn't going to be able to go back and start. He was going to have to start over from the beginning. There was no way he was going to continue with his business because everything was burned down. So he lost like all his investments. The mob that was attacking everybody in the whole country that lived in that village, they're the ones who came in and burned his his business, because it's more like tribalism. Like you're of this tribe, so that's how I saw it, and that's how I still see it today. And I feel like if we came together as a people, and especially the youth, because most of Kenyan's population is the youth, like people around my age or older, and I feel like we could make a change, and this election could be very different from the one that we had to go through. There's no way to tell somebody don't do this, you know. But for me, I'm doing this with this video so that they see what I've been through, so that nobody else has to go through the same thing that I went through, or my family and other families that, you know, were affected in this whole thing. And the goal is for Kenyans to really agree on things, and, you know, they have to compromise. Like if somebody is elected and you didn't like that, you just have to let it go. It's just like America. We just had an election, and not everybody agreed on each other's views, but there were no fights. I mean, protests, like that's fine. Peaceful protests, like, yeah, that would help out. Like you come and you just base your views, but nobody's harmed, nobody's touched, and nobody's affected. That's what I would want to see happen in lovely Kenya. Yeah. I pray that from this story that I've shared with you, that you will be able to do one thing, and that is to consciously choose to have a peaceful election. I will be doing a fast on the day of the elections, and I will be praying for Kenya, and I pray that you will do the same. You will be able to pray for Kenya and to vote and agree on one thing, which is to have peace in the country, regardless of who wins the elections.